Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode number 21 in Be With Me. Season 15 means the book of Colossians. We're actually in chapter 4 in his final greetings. And I'm going to title today Christian Restoration. And the reason being is we're going to have two examples today. One of a person that started bad and turned out good, and another guy who at this juncture is good, but he's actually going to turn out bad. It's amazing that this is even in the Bible. You would never put this in the Bible if it wasn't a spiritual book directed and inspired by God. So here it is. We're in Colossians chapter 4, and I want to mention, we'll finish with Tychicus. We did him yesterday, and that you may know how we are, and that he, Tychicus, may encourage your heart. That's from Colossians 4, verse 8. And then verse 9, and with him Onesimus, our faithful and beloved brother, who is one of you, they will tell you of everything that has taken place here. We're going to hold on Onesimus and talk about him in our next book, which is Philemon. Verse 10, Aristarchus, my fellow prisoner, greets you. And then here's the guy for today. And Mark, the cousin of Barnabas, parentheses, concerning whom you have received instruction. If he comes to you, welcome him. So Mark, the cousin of Barnabas, is in the fold. He's in the connection of Christianity. Now, Christianity is a cast of wonderful characters. Now, we have to know who this John Mark guy is, because he eventually ends up writing the Bible. He writes the book of Mark. But here's the thing. He starts out on the A team. He starts out on the dream team in the first missionary journey. This was 13 or 15 years before this, in 46 AD. Mark, as a young man, as a helper, goes on the first missionary journey. At least he starts with it. It starts from Antioch, which was the sending church at that time. He goes to Cyprus. So on this dream team is Paul, who, writes half the New Testament, and Barnabas. They go on the first missionary journey, and they go with John Mark. And as soon as they leave Cyprus, so they take one boat to Cyprus, they leave Cyprus and they go up to central Turkey to Perga, and on that leg of the journey, John Mark abandons them. This is from Acts 13:13. He leaves them and returns to Jerusalem. So John Mark leaves Paul and Barnabas and returns to Jerusalem. So there's this rift in the missionary team. Well, it gets worse than that. So then 3 years later, after they get back, they're going to go, Paul and Barnabas supposedly are going to go on the second missionary journey. They have this idea, let's return to the same places again and go check out the churches. And then in Acts 15:36 and 37, now Barnabas, remember Barnabas is the cousin of John Mark, wanted to take them with them. So then the team would be, again, let's get the old band together, Paul and Barnabas and John Mark. Now Paul in verse 38, thinks it best not to take with them one who had withdrawn from them. Makes perfect sense. And then Paul, has this argument with Barnabas. Remember, John Mark's cousin, it's his blood, and they have this sharp disagreement. So the second missionary journey, Paul and Barnabas, they split up the band. And Paul goes on the second missionary journey with Silas, and Barnabas goes with John Mark, apparently in Christian service and in faithful Christian service from that point on. So here's the thing, is Paul had some sort of a disagreement with Barnabas and probably with John Mark here for abandoning them, but 15 years later, we get an update. So this book at the conclusion of Colossians is the update. And what we find is John Mark, has been restored to fellowship with Paul. So kind of like a marriage. Marriage is about recovery and forgiveness and restoring, and maybe even a little forgetting, and fixing the broken relationship on an ongoing basis. And similarly here, Mark is a good example of had a breach with Paul, and now is serving Paul and mentioned to Paul, and is in Paul's heart. All right, so there's another guy here who we have to mention, and that's Demas in verse 14. So he says that Luke, the beloved physician, greets you, as does Demas. Now, the good news about Demas is at this moment in time, he's described as greeting the church, and in Philemon 4:24, he's described as my fellow worker. That's the good news. The bad news is he falls away. In 2 Timothy 4:10, it says, for Demas, in in love with the present world, has deserted me and has gone to Thessalonica. So he deserts Paul physically and spiritually in a time of great need. And he describes him as being in love with the present world, which that's never a good thing in Christianity. In 1 John 2:15, it says, do not love the world or the things of the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. It's kind of Christian code for you have left the faith or maybe never were in the faith. All right, so we have one guy here, John Mark, who starts bad and ends up good, which is a great story. Then we have this other guy, Demas, who started off on the team, and then at the final thing we hear about him in Paul's last letter, he's off the team, and we never hear that he gets back on the team. So here's the concluding points. Number one, Christianity is a marathon, not a sprint. Conflicts between individuals it should be, normal, but they have shrapnel that affects others. So this conflict between John Mark affects Barnabas and affects the missionary journey. And it's just, try not to get into this position. So be faithful in your position. Do the acre that God has given you to be responsible for, your area of responsibility. For we're all have a position on the battlefield. And people around you may fall or fail. And what are you going to do? Let's have some skills of restoration and forgiveness. So the question for today is, who do you need to forgive? Who do you need to ask forgiveness? You might be the person that has failed. And then you need to ask for forgiveness. And let's commit to be on the Lord's team in the body of Christ 5 years from now, which is what Demas did not do. And let's plan on being there with this motley crew of fellowship people that God has placed us in. People that require forgiveness and maybe forgetfulness and certainly restoration. Let's be people of restoration when appropriate. Let's be marked by restoration. Let's be marked by forgiveness. Let's be marked by Christian restoration, just like John Mark was. Thanks for listening.